we listen to the three leaders who were here, Mr. Borrell from the European Union, Minister Lavrov and Secretary Yellen, they convey different messages. It may masquerade in their messages as a diplomatic charm offensive. But if you listen to Secretary Yellen, she came with a very big stick, a lot of threat that she's saying that if you don't comply with sanctions that are imposed by the United States, they will respond harshly. That's a serious threat. It's not building a coalition of countries on what is supposed to be a common purpose. It's basically very coercive. Borrell's message is very nuanced. You can see the manner in which he's conveying, for him to go and say, we are not going to dictate who South Africa should deal with, he's quite correct. But they all came here to persuade South Africa to take their position. And what we are trying to understand, all of us, is what happened behind closed doors, because what is said at a press conference and behind closed doors are totally different. And my suspicion at this stage, SABC, is that there's a fear that South Africa would attend the Africa-Russia summit, because that will demystify all this that has been said, that Russia is totally isolated, if that summit becomes very successful. The EU is doing that, the Americans are doing that, and of course Lavrov came here to lobby for support, and particularly South African attendance. So we would see how South Africa would respond to that attendance. But you correctly define what power is. The ability to persuade people to do what you want. But really a stick that Secretary Yellen is carrying, it's not going to augur well with many people here and in the continent, because it comes up with the old notion you are with us or with them. And I don't think that works. It's basically what she was supposed to do is building bridges. If you listen to what Secretary Blinken said when he was here sometimes last year, the message was totally nuanced. He unveiled a document, a very good document actually, that speaks about development. But in that document, what is hidden in it is the isolation not only of Russia and China. And within the European Union, they don't agree in terms of what the Americans are trying to do. For instance, on the question of China, the Europeans, the French are really outspoken to say they want to take a much more consultative and friendly posture than a confrontational posture that the Americans are coming up with.
And in what has been defined as an existential battle for global dominance, then comes the question of hard and soft power, and if one is more effective than the other, and whether the length of time it takes to achieve results. So if we talk about military might, we know that basically, ultimately, that's what it comes down to, what will win the war between Russia and Ukraine. But though soft power does tend to operate more subtly and over a longer time on the horizon, it does nonetheless emerge as a key feature of Ukraine's defense, according to what some are doing. But for countries like South Africa, it's a lot more than that, because, as you say, the various tools, approaches that have been used to coerce South Africa, to nudge it in the right direction, whichever way you want to characterize it, there are lots of nuances.
Sophie, people have defined diplomacy as continuous negotiation, and that diplomacy, it's harmless and it's innocuous. Those are the basic definition of diplomacy, and this continuous negotiation is required. And it's always often said that the outbreak of war, it's the failure of diplomacy. So diplomacy has failed in the Ukrainian instance. That's why Ukraine is where it is. And this starts from 2014. It's not something that began last year. People are totally dishonest about it, because in 2014, there was a coup there that really changed the balance of forces there. But there are a lot of political issues at play in terms of this. And I think South Africa will serve its purpose if it were to engage constructively with everyone involved in the conflict. I mean, Borrell's message, there was a hidden threat in it, but it was nuanced much better than Yellen's message. I mean, Borrell was at pains to indicate that trade between South Africa and the European Union is 44 billion euros, just under 800 billion rands. And yet, that is used as a carrot to say this is what you are likely to lose if you don't toe the line, if you don't agree with us in terms of what we are trying to achieve. But within the European Union, they don't agree themselves. I mean, 2 weeks ago, a member of the European Union, Hungary, vetoed a resolution to send more money to Ukraine. So you can see even within the club itself, there's no unanimity. And foreign policy does not operate on the basis of unanimity. Foreign policy is a convergence of different views that are better managed within the diplomatic field, and avoiding threats and intimidation. That's what makes diplomacy to succeed. And I think the Americans, they are not learning their lesson. They keep on threatening everyone, and they're forgetting they're becoming gradually irrelevant because new centers of powers are emerging. If you look at the Shanghai Cooperation Agreement, it's a new forum that has emerged. The trade is no longer done using dollars. And this is a growing informal countries meeting. And these countries are likely to formalize the Shanghai Cooperation Agreement into an international organization that actually would compete with the Western Bretton Woods institution.
And just to finally, before I let you go, Dr. Makhubela, I need to ask about the invoking of the UN Charter to remind South Africa of its responsibility of where its loyalty, so to speak, ought to lie. But then again, as we heard Julius Malema speak earlier on about NATO establishment, its mandate, and some of what it's used to do, that also has to be seen within the context of the position that South Africa is taking, that of non-alignment. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the UN Charter, we all invoke it, all of us, all countries, they invoke that when they want to justify their positions. I mean, for Mr. Borrell to say that as an Italian, he would remember the concept called ragione di Stato, which basically means that when the state's security feels threatened, it actually acts in contravention of the basic norms that are there. There's no global governance, though the international organizations are there, but countries remain sovereign. And the concept of remain sovereign is that there's no one who has powers over your borders. You can make up your decision. And people have done that. I mean, the invasion of Iraq is one example that comes into being that divided the United Nations so much. Only now people are starting to regret. And in that conflict, more than 1 million Iraqis have been killed. So the use of the UN Charter to justify everyone. If you go to the Russians, they would find a way to say their intervention is in terms of international law, and they would invoke relevant part of the UN Charter to try to justify that.